Hi, I'm Donald Taylor. I'm the chairman of the Learning Technologies Conference, and I'm here today in our first Google Hangout of 6 that we'll be running during the conference with Martin Couzins of LearnPatch. And we're going to be talking about really the theme of the entire conference, the future of L&D. Well, Martin, the conference lasts for 2 days. We've got 30 minutes at most, the future of L&D. We talk about this a lot. There are some points I know we want to bring up, and the first one has got to be, we've come from, traditionally, a classroom background, classroom delivery face-to-face. Is that the future?
Less and less so, I would say.
Is this you making it up, or is there data behind this?
Well, that's my conservative answer.
Right.
And my less conservative answer would be, you must be joking if you think it's going to be 74% or more, or even 50% of face-to-face delivery in the future, for various reasons which everyone in L&D is only too aware of. You know, it's kind of saddled with cost and bricks and mortar approach, impact, relevance, all sorts of issues.
Okay, go on.
But I'm not basing this in terms of what I think. I'm just going on some of the research that is being pumped out by various organisations. So the Learning Performance Institute's recent learning barometer of around 300 people, that said that of those people, 74% are they like using and will be using face-to-face formal classroom training. The ATD has done a big state of the industry survey, which doesn't say it's 74%, but it's over 50%. It's declining slowly, but the bulk of delivery for most organisations, based on a lot of the research that's available, is still formal face-to-face.
Okay, so I chair the LPI, the Learning Performance Institute, and I'm very familiar with our annual survey. For example, we ask people what media people have got and what they're using for delivering learning and delivering materials, I should say. And guess what? Year on year, everything increases apart from the classroom, where there's a small decrease. And yet, we've had e-learning around since, 1999, and other forms of technology-supported learning before that. Learning hasn't seen that precipitous drop-off that we saw with CDs or any new technology which immediately is superseded by something else. So why not? Why has face-to-face training been as resilient as it has been in the face of what was in 1999 portrayed as an absolute classroom killer, the possibility of e-learning? So let's turn the question around. Why is the classroom proved such a strong contender?
I think there'll be lots of reasons for that. I mean, there's a bigger context here, which is education, which is really what training is perceived to be still, is still a classroom-based experience from the age of, in the UK, from 4 to 16, soon to be 18 for everyone. And there is still a massive focus on face-to-face in further education and higher education too.
Sure.
I mean, that is changing slowly, but you know, that's the context, that's where we've come from. And in some senses, this legacy is very embedded in organisations. We're very comfortable, we've got skill sets around it. Why hasn't technology been the classroom killer already? Probably because we haven't had the mass adoption of technology that we have seen in the very recent past. So CDs, it's kind of analog. Is it analog? Is it digital? It was, you know, about putting something in the post to experience digitally. It never really was a comfortable, I don't think, sort of learner experience.
If you look at how vinyl fell off once CDs came out, and then of course CDs dropped off once download media came out. What happened there was you had straightforward substitution technologies. Your CD is a complete one-for-one swap with a vinyl. That's what my kids call it, with a record.
Yeah.
We don't have, or at least we don't have successful one-to-one swaps that replace the existing training technology. Training technology being a face-to-face in the classroom. There is no successful replication of that, anything that tries to replicate it is generally seen as an inferior copy. It's a webinar, well, yeah, but it's not like a proper classroom environment.
Yeah.
So when you have a swap that isn't a straight one-to-one swap, what happens is culture gets in the way. People expect something else. They don't get what they wanted. And you have to have a change in what people are wanting and expecting in order to make a large shift there, rather than them looking around for something which doesn't quite do the job that the old thing used to do. What's your view about where we are with the shift right now? Do you think that the slow and steady decline of perhaps, I don't know, 2 to 3% per year in use of classroom is going to continue? Or do you think it's bottomed out? We're going to be at about 50%? And because the stats say, don't they, it's something like 60 to 70% of classroom, of delivery typically is done through the classroom still.
Yeah. Look, let me take a step back to what you were saying. Yeah. I think what's happened with the mass adoption of technology is what changes everything, because everyone all the customers of the learning team now have multi-variant ways of experiencing anything.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case when it was CDs.
No.
It was just, you get something through the post, you put it in your machine, this is what you do with it. It's not like that anymore. So what does that mean? It means that the user, the customer, the learner, they can do this for themselves. There's information abundance in a way there never was before. You had to go in the classroom to get the information. Yeah. You don't have to do that anymore. So I think that, that's the context now. So what does this mean for classroom training? I don't think that there should be face-to-face learning experience type of person. I'm not a naysayer. What I would say is that right now there's going to be, clearly there has to be a further decline in formal face-to-face training.
Why does it have to be?
Because it just doesn't stack up. I mean, it doesn't, it costs too much, and the impact, how good is the impact? I think people want to come together for face-to-face experiences for lots of reasons. I'm not so sure they have to be there for training. Yeah. And I think that's where this gets a bit complex, because there's a huge benefit for people to come together because we're social animals and we need to. Yeah. But does it have to be in a classroom facing forward with someone at the front delivering content? No, it's a complete waste of time and waste of money, because you can get that stuff somewhere else.
If it's only a matter of delivering content, but surely if it was only a matter of delivering content, then the LMSs that were launched in 1999 would now have completely destroyed the classroom, which they haven't. So it's not just about content, is it? So what's the other secret behind that for the classrooms?
No, I think that I think what's interesting about where we are now and this discussion is that what becomes of face-to-face.
Right.
What makes a really, really good face-to-face experience? And I think that what did 20 years ago is not what will make one now.
Really?
Absolutely, because we're talking about, the things we're talking about, some of the newer trends that we seem to be hearing about are things like facilitation. People want to be able to come together and they want to potentially get from A to B. Yep. They want to learn from each other. And that is a facilitative experience. Yep. That is not someone delivering content from the front of a room. Okay. It's not.
No, it's not. But I would still say that a good facilitation was a skill that certainly existed 20 years ago. But I take your point that the focus on content will go. Okay, so people are going to be still using classrooms, but in a different way. So if they're going to be using it in a different way, what, in your mind, does the classroom of the future look like?
Well, the context is changing.
Go on.
Right. So, I think we need to always look at bigger picture influences on corporate learning, if you like. And if classrooms in schools are changing, then it follows that the experience the children are having now is going to seep into how we do things around here. And increasingly, that is technology assisted. Those are digital learning experiences. It's not totally, but people are beginning to use them, technology in different ways. Like, so one example might be my kids are really into mathletics. So they can go onto the site and they can compete against any other kids their age or anywhere around the world in doing sums, for example. You know, so if that's the sort of experience they're having now, I think what the classroom looks like, it's really hard to know. I'm sorry, I can't buff up that crystal ball.
And look into it for
I'm
us.
not entirely sure.
Right.
Honestly, because what I'm thinking is when I see neuroscientists talk about what makes a really good face-to-face, physical face-to-face experience, it might be stuff that might scare the living daylights out of someone, but it'd be a really emotional experience because learning gets really embedded when it's really emotional. So I think it's interesting. 2 or 3 years ago, I saw someone from ASOS, the retailer, talking about the fact that the millennial managers that they were doing workshops with actors for their managers in how to become better managers. They didn't want digital delivery. They wanted real life. These are real situations. Right. What do you do about that in this particular situation? So, that I'm thinking that there's probably going to be room for more of that. And really, but I think we just have to have a deeper understanding of what makes a really good face-to-face experience.
The reason I was asking was you were making this shift towards experience rather than development or delivery of content, which I think is absolutely a fair point to make. And I think for me, it's a bit like retail. At the moment, retail is going through a bit of a shock because it's increasingly suffering from online competition. And people are trying to reinvent the retail experience. There's definitely value in a face-to-face retail experience, but it's not the same value as you get or used to get by shopping in the store, except in certain places. So a really personalized service that's augmented by technology in a physical environment is turning out to work very well with some retail stores, where they're getting greater sales per customer and greater lifetime value per customer by being very personalized and knowing about people and being able to help them better in the physical environment, where they can help give people a chance to test out tools. For example, particularly with the mobile phone stores. In fact, we've got Mike Booth talking about that tomorrow from Vodafone. He's got a great case study about it. You were talking about technology. Let's talk about how people actually learn with technology. Great research from Good Practice. Talking about how managers, it's the secret learning lives of managers, talking about how they really learn. What's the secret learning life of managers, and what will shock us about it, and what lessons can we learn from it?
So I think that it's a nice shift, because I think we think about learning in terms of gaining knowledge. I think we tend to. There's this kind of prevailing idea that that's what it is, when in actual fact it's about doing. And so this particular bit of research from Good Practice is great, because it's 500 in-depth interviews with managers, and they didn't ask about learning at all. They asked about, what do you do when faced with an unfamiliar challenge? And
the reason for asking the question that way was to avoid the, I've gone to training course. So ask people about learning, they say, I did a course.
They don't want to be led down that kind of learning rabbit hole. So what do you get? You get exactly what everyone watching this, what you do, what the guys doing the cameras are doing. They go online. They ask someone first, and then they go online. That's what they do. It's about ease of access to information and the speed of the result.
But yes, so contrasting, if they had a solution which they knew was going to give a high quality answer, but was difficult to get to, and they had one which was, for want of a better phrase, quick and dirty, it was going to be okay, but it was fast. Which one did the managers go for?
Quick and dirty.
They went quick and dirty. And what does that tell us?
Well, it tells us that it tells us two things. Firstly, it tells us how the people, our customers, are learning. It tells us what they are doing.
Really practically, this is how they actually behave.
But this is critically important.
And this was 500 UK managers, and they were telephones. It wasn't self-selecting. It was a methodologically, it was a very good survey.
But we'll come back to this, because there's a great stat from Towards Maturity about this, but it's critically important to understand how people do this stuff, because that's what we have to start to design for, right? Towards Maturity have a stat that say that only 30% of L&D professionals they ask how learners learn within the organisation, only 30%. So this idea of actually really being there, sitting with people, understanding how they learn, is really important. The second thing is, those people just aren't going to those resources that have been funded and been put on the intranet or been put wherever. These are, useful, good, high value training resources that no one's really looking at. And that research does show that people do think it's useful. They don't pan it and say, I'd never touch the stuff that the company produces. The point is, it's just not fitting the speed and ease of access criteria. It's not. And therefore,
typically the competition here is Google or Amazon. It's a large multinational with billions of dollars spent on research as to what makes the best user experience. It's hardly surprising that if people have learned or got their expectations of what an online experience is like from there, that we're going to come a cropper when we try to go up against it in the learning environment. You haven't got resources to do it. What do you think are the lessons that we should be taking away from good practice with this idea that people are more likely to go for what's easy and fast than what they know is important?
I think the number one thing, and a bit of a stuck record on this thing, on this element, is definitely how are people learning? Now, I know there's a tension here, which is the organisation needs people to know stuff and maybe act in and behave in certain ways. But ultimately, you need to kind of bridge those, what could be opposing positions. One of the need to know and the how people learn. And I think that's, so the number one thing from that research to me is understanding how your people learn. And interestingly with that research it was the managers. And the managers arguably are the key to unlocking really good performance in the whole organisation. So they could be your advocates at some point in all of this. The other thing is that an inordinate amount of money is spent on leadership and management development. And this piece of research, depressingly, would suggest that resource is not well spent. People aren't using it. So I think this research is a wake-up call. I think lots of people probably look at it and go, oh, this is hugely challenging. But I would say that it's a really positive thing that we've got this kind of research to be able to go to and start challenging thinking within the organisation, because I think this is hard when there's so much at stake, when you've invested so much in your internal online learning and it's not working. And the person responsible for that might still be in the organisation. There might be some politics around that, big budgets and all the rest of it. And you might just have to say that some of that is a sunk cost. You might be able to do stuff to it to bring it back to life, which I think is the role of curation can play in that. But I think this research can be quite challenging because it will say, actually, we spend all this money on this stuff and managers and no one's looking at it.
Not necessarily. Suppose something's only used very infrequently, but is still vital. It may be that spending the money on it is really important, because what you do is you're getting a key message across, and the rest of the stuff which is less important, people can learn about however they want to. So I think we should always remember what the content is we're talking about here. All right, so.
But you would understand what is vital. If you had a good understanding of what people looked at, what they thought about it, could they comment on it? Could they rate it? Could it be ascribed to a role? Could you have the Amazon experience that says people like you that started in this role looked at these 5 things in the first month? That's what I mean about opening it up and being able to give access to that stuff. So I think I'm even if it's only viewed once every time that person in that role starts, the new job, but it's really critical information, it should absolutely be there. It's how you put it in front of people, and it's your understanding of where that fits in with their role and how they learn.
We've talked about how face-to-face remains strong but is declining. We've talked about the fact that people don't learn as we necessarily expect them to learn. They tend to go for what's quick and dirty, fits the need, rather than for something that is the highest quality. Is there any other key research that's come out recently which you think has illuminated what the future of learning development possibly is going to look like?
I think that I've got my piece of paper, so I'm very, very analog, so I apologise, but I used to do a lot of DJing, so I've got a lot of vinyl, so I'm showing my age here. I think that there's also, what does the future look like for the L&D team? I think that, so we've had the towards maturity research, which comes out once a year, and I find that fascinating. That piece of research is quite big, you know, but it's self-reported. So actually, it's L&D professionals sort of bearing their soul, if you like, in terms of what they do and what they don't do. And I find that in itself quite interesting. And I find the fact that there's, you know, the pace of change is quite slow. So the decline in face-to-face training is slow, and the pace of change to new technologies and how technology could transform learning is slow. So not that maybe causation and correlation, I don't know, but there's this idea of, are we just really comfortable with something that was, you know, potentially effective 20 years ago? Are we still holding on to that? Do we still have skill sets around that? Is that what we're known for? You know, there are lots of kind of legacy issues around it. So, but I think that the some of that towards maturity research, you know, why do colleagues want to learn? Absolutely chimes with the good practice stuff. 76% want to be able to do their job faster and better.
Right.
So, oh, surprise, surprise. You know, you talk to some managers and it's ease of access and it's speed. So there are some interesting correlations in these different bits of data. And people want to learn for their own personal development, which might challenge some people because you think, oh, actually, no one really cares about that sort of thing, but actually they probably do more than they think. And there are also lots of research around the fact that people like to learn at their own pace. They want to use mobile, and they're very reliant on using the web. You know, there's tons of stuff out there that tells us that story. However, it's the impact that you know, there was quite a lot of stuff in that towards maturity report that talks about skill sets and challenges around understanding technology and the fact that L&D teams are going to have to sort of skill themselves up, especially around technology. But the frightening one really is the fact that 70%, we're talking about impact, and that's a massive issue, and that doesn't go away. 70% of L&D teams are failing to improve business productivity.
So just be clear about this. This is self-reported numbers. So it's people saying,
we are failing to improve business productivity. And that's 70% of 600 respondents. It's just like, wow, you know, that's extraordinarily bad. And I don't, to unpick it, you would look at, well, there is a story around impact and productivity. You know, how do you measure that internally? And that's a big, big ongoing challenge for L&D. Also, the UK as a whole has very bad levels of productivity, worse than the G7, very low. So it's not, you know, kind of, you're not alone if you're in the UK and you reported that you're having problems with that. However, it does raise some rather big questions around, well, how do you measure impact and how do you improve it? And another worrying stat in this impact piece was that 25% of organizations have achieved increased efficiency as a result of their training strategies. 25%
have increased.
Yeah, have increased efficiency.
75% haven't.
So, you know, big productivity issue, big efficiencies, you know, using technology, big challenge around making.
So what's happening here? People are using training for the wrong reasons. They're using it for the right reasons, but ineffectively. Why are these numbers so appalling?
Well, I think I haven't had a chance to properly unpick all of that, and I suspect there's quite a lot of stuff at play. As I said, I think actually it's quite hard. You know, if the history or the legacy is measuring learning for learning's sake, which is quite a lot of the impact measurement methodology that's been used by L&D has been around that. So how do you shift from that to understanding the impact of some of these learning interventions and learning experiences on productivity. I think actually there's a massive gap there. I don't think, you know, people might be doing it in the context of their own organisation, but you've got this, that's a big growth area for understanding data that's driven out of learning and how that plugs into all the other HR and business data that's already collected.
And enables you to see what the correlation is between activity in the L&D department and productivity or whatever.
So it might just be that term is saying that maybe we don't know how to measure it in the first place.
I think it could be.
We know how to measure learning for learning's sake, which is pretty much kind of out the Kirkpatrick.
Well, it's time expended, isn't it? Basically, the more time you spend doing it, the better it is.
Yeah, and so those kind of measures will have to change. So that might be going on there. In terms of the efficiency as a result of training strategies, who knows what is going on there? I mean, that's a suggestion that you're implementing a strategy that is going to make things less efficient.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure how one does that or how that works. It sounds absolutely nuts to me, if I may say so. I don't know. Maybe things just aren't working out. It could. I think there's probably some issues around the technology and making it work, especially when you're doing large-scale technological implementations. There's a lot resting on it, and it may not actually lead to any efficiencies over, you know, the first part of that adoption, and it may not lead to any anyway because it's not used properly.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to wrap up now with some brilliant insight. If you can buff up your crystal ball, I'm going to come back and summarise what we've been talking about. First off, we were talking about the resistant persistence of face-to-face. Classroom remains the area where learning and development spends most of its time. And we know the stats are something like 60 to 70% of L&D teams in UK and Europe spend their time delivering through the classroom. The second point was that people don't learn as we expect them to learn when they're doing it online. And managers in particular will learn in an entirely different way, usually by the predictable ways, perhaps, of saying, talking to somebody and looking up online. And finally, if we do some delivery and it has an impact, getting facetoface first too, we have no idea how much that impact is. And most people, by far, the majority of people are saying that they do not believe their department has any effect on the productivity, was it, of the organisation?
Yeah.
So basically, we are using stuff that isn't light. We're using an old form that people do like, the classroom. People don't learn the way we expect them to, and we can't measure the impact. We can't show it's valuable, typically. How does that paint the future of L&D?
That's not for everyone, I hasten to add. And I don't want this to become a very depressing first Google Hangout.
So you've got to turn it around then, Martin.
So I think that the red flags are that those three areas will be taken by other people. So it suddenly won't be an issue for L&D because the managers know what they need to learn. They'll tell their teams where to go and they'll support that because that works for them. And that might have nothing to do with the organisation. I think that as more and more tools come on stream that have great user experience, then that's going to suck the learner towards them. And in terms of impact, if L&D aren't sorting it out themselves, then you can be sure that other people in the organisations is.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But my thing would be I think the opportunity here is to really understand how people learn. That is it. Suck that information up, and it might give you lots of agony to see that it's not quite what you're presenting at the moment. But that's a great starting point, and then use that to start building out from there. And I think that's the way to go, and that helps you stay abreast of technological innovation. And how people are using different tools. Is that the final?
That is a popular cry.
Yeah,
supporting.
They agree with me.
They agree with you
in the next room, and so I think I would definitely go with that. And then I would be working with the organisation to look at impact, because I think impact is going to look very different in the context of the organisation. And I don't think it's one size fits all. And I think that's a conversation. I think that this could be a very surprising one, because you know, it might turn out that lots of people around the table haven't got a clue how to measure impact in terms of what they're doing as well. Anyway, and the final thing is just the skills around technology. I would encourage anyone in L&D to start using some of the tools that people are using if you're not already, and talk about that, share that with the team, share that with the business, and be an advocate for that as well. You've really got to, you know, use stuff and play with it and understand it.
It's very good. I can think of no concise question to wrap up, and anyway, we're out of time. So Martin, thank you very much. I think the crystal ball is slightly less hazy, but I think we're still facing some challenges. We look forward to addressing some of those during the course of the rest of the conference, and we'll be with you on these Google Hangouts over the course of the next couple of days. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for checking out the recording. Bye for now.